Hi guys, welcome to episode 3 of the Biotope vlog. My name's Englezou from CE Fish Essentials, and I'd like to thank you all for your time and for tuning in to this next edition where I'm going to be talking to you about one particular biotope that I came across along the Atabapo River on the border of Colombia and Venezuela a few years back. So this particular place is probably one of the most enchanting places I've ever been. The Atabapo River is truly one of a kind. To travel along this river that has black tea-stained water and beautiful white sand is quite unreal. And having been absolutely captivated by species from this region for many years, to actually have gone there and really immersed myself in an attempt to truly understand these species and this place was an immense privilege for me. Being able to see species like autumn angelfish, Uaru Fernandez Yepezai, Dicaisaria, the little plecos, the little social plecos. There are so many species. But today I'm just going to speak to you about one particular place that I visited where I was able to find some pretty cool species, and I'm going to show you some pictures of the place, some pictures of the species I found, and talk a little bit about the parameters there and just my overall experience. I want to try and give you guys, to the best of my ability, how do you say it, like to make your imaginations come to life and visualize that you can be there. Okay, so where to begin? I remember setting off along the Inirida River initially. I was situated in Inirida town. And we took a boat up the Inirida River and onto the Guaviare. Now this is interesting because Inirida is a blackwater river, and as you go onto the Guaviare River, which is a silty river, the transition is quite obvious. It's an incredible change in water systems, but not as much as when you get to where the Guaviare River meets the Atabapo, and later on that flows quite quickly into the Orinoco River. But where it meets the Atabapo River, you get an incredible meeting of the waters, much like where the Amazonas River meets the Rio Negro, and you have this incredible contrast in silty, what they call white water, not like rapids, but white as in milky water, and then this dark brown tea-stained water, like right next to each other, flowing for quite some time into the Orinoco until it all begins to mix. And now that is really special, something special to see. Anyway, we got to that meeting of the waters at San Fernando de Atabapo, and yeah, I was so excited to get onto this river. I couldn't believe it. I'd envisioned this place for many years, and finally I was there. So lots of emotions, lots of intrigue and excitement, and just general amazement, disbelief almost. So I think it took us probably about half a day worth of travel until we eventually got to this particular stop. Initially we done the Colombian checkpoint, where you go and show your documentation to the soldiers, because, as I say, it's on the border with Venezuela, and about 3/4 down or should I say up the Atabapo River, you get to Venezuela and you cross over. So we did the Colombian part first, ascended the Atabapo River, and eventually got to a place called Merey. It's a village, and to my knowledge, I remember our fishermen that were taking us there, Jesus and Christian, they were a father and son fisherman family. They apparently had some family members at this village, so I assume at some point in their family history they would have come away from that type of lifestyle and moved into Inirida town, where they became fishermen. But yeah, so they had some family members there and they were able to speak to them. To my knowledge, it's been a couple of years now, but there were about 39 families living in this village, so a reasonable size. And they are of Curipaco descent, so their ethnicity is Curipaco, and they speak Curipaco language as well, which is also known as Baniwa and some other names. Curipaco people live in the region of the Isana River, the sort of lower Inirida River, Atabapo, and some others. So that area, I suppose it's upper Rio Negro region and into Atabapo, Guyana, I think it's called. Yeah, so that was that. We eventually got a permission from the leader of the village, which is the done thing is that if you're going to go onto somebody's land, that you speak to the head of that village, or depending on where you are, it could be just a small tribe. As long as they're contacted tribes and not uncontacted, then you should be safe and not in any danger usually. That being said, we're probably much more of a danger to them, not only historically because of all the massacres that have taken place in South America, but also just disease transfer. So yeah, luckily this isn't the case along the Atabapo. So yeah, the head of the village allowed us to explore a little and do some fishing, and yeah, it was just very kind of them. The first real instance for me of doing that sort of thing, so it felt like a real privilege. Now Merey, the village, I came to realize later on actually means well, Merey is the name of in Venezuela of the cashew nut tree. So I assume that that's why it's called that there may be an abundance of cashew nut trees either cultivated there historically or that were growing naturally. It is within the natural range of that tree species, as far as I understand. And what I found interesting when I did a little bit of research as well was that in Maori language from New Zealand, so you know, complete opposite side really, but not that far, it's like a sea apart, they they call one of their tree fern species Curipako, which I thought was fascinating. Now, I don't know if there's any connections there, who knows, but interesting for such a unique name to be shared across those two places. Anyway, slightly digressing. So we sought permission, and in this village there were two distinct biotopes. Bearing in mind at this time it was the high water season, so fishing is kind of not really done at this time. It's very difficult to capture fish at this time. It's only really during the low water season that fishing is done by anybody, really. So they were not, it wasn't really problematic for us to fish there anyway. So there were two distinct biotopes there, one of which was just in the shallows of the main river, where the substrate was mostly igneous rock, like gneiss rock. And there we found quite a number of species, which I'll put a list for you, but a few that stood out in particular were some young and they were varying ages, but quite a lot of juvenile Hemiodus gracilis, which were lovely to see in the wild. There were large shoals of these young fish swimming round and round these few big boulders that were in the shallows. You can see the picture of that, and yeah, it was lovely to see. But interestingly, among the main group of Hemiodus was another Hemiodus species, which I suspect is Hemiodus thayeri, or at least that's the closest species, in small numbers, that was, I suppose, living in mimicry with them. This is probably something that they do as juveniles, because typically as adults you tend to find them in species only groups. So it's probably just a safety thing. But equally interestingly was that in that group were very small juvenile Acestrorhynchus, which is a predator. It's like a pike, really. It's quite a predatory carakin, and really nice to see them in that group, kind of hiding, and I suspect occasionally predating on some of the other fish as they grow. So yeah, that was a very simple biotope. It was in the main river. There wasn't really much cover. The water's very high, so it wasn't as low as where the sandy substrate was. So it was mostly rock substrate, igneous rock. It was very, very rough to touch. And they were just swimming back and forth, utilizing the little shade cast by these boulders and coming in and out of the sun. So that was nice to see. We fished a bunch of them out to take photos, and as I say, because it was the high water season and fishing isn't typically done, it was warmly welcomed by the locals for us to bring quite a large number of these fish in, and they were definitely part of the next meal for the village. So yeah, I think they appreciated having us there, at least if not a little bit annoying, at least we brought something to the table, literally. The other distinct biotope there was just as the river bank met, the river met the shore. Along the river bank there was a combination of terrestrial grass that was half submerged and half not, and in amongst all of that was what I think is a Bulbostylis schomburgiana, probably, Now it's a safe guess, but we'll have to give it the little CF just to say that it's most likely that species. Okay, so it kind of looks like grass, but it's a little bit like a cyperus species, I guess. Anyway, in and amongst all of this kind of grass-like submerged vegetation, we were able to find quite a lot of cool fish. One of which I don't think I have a photo of this one. I'll try and bring up another photo if I can. I think John may have one who was with us. What was it? Acastridium discus, probably, the long twig catfish. Absolutely beautiful. And literally on the long strands of grass as well, like with the green iridescence and everything, they just absolutely made for that biotope. And I came to find this more and more and more as I saw all of these fishes in context. I really understood why they were colored the way they were, why they had certain patterns and so on. And this is I'm going to give you guys a really good example of this in the next video, where I'm going to talk about another biotope along the Atabapo River, and a fish species which really surprised me and really opened my eyes to how well adapted these fishes are to their environments. But anyway, yeah, Acastridium discus, there was a few others which I did note down. I'll put them in a list, as I said. One was Martinis hypsalcon, I believe, a young juvenile, which was absolutely beautiful, had a slight gold operculum. And then I was digging around in the grass, trying my best to find something that hadn't already been found. And I was, this is just the way I am, I just continually press ahead because I'm just thinking, you know, there must be something else here interesting. And I was really lucky to find a juvenile Mesonauta egregius, which is one of the lesser known Mesonauta in the hobby. I think you don't really see them in the aquarium hobby. It's one in the genus which is lesser known. But to me, I mean, you can see by the photo, it's absolutely gorgeous. What a beautiful fish. Honestly, I was asking myself, how on earth are all of these fish in this river? Bearing in mind, this was my first moments catching fish in the Atabapo River, and I can find so much yellowy golden shine coming off of these fish. I was like, wow, this must be something to do with the tannins, or maybe it's to do with their diet. I was like, so many questions were going through my head at that point. I really remember feeling so intrigued. But it really was a very, very special place. And there's many more that I'm going to talk to you about anyway. But just a quick note, the water parameters, the pH, more or less everywhere in the Atabapo, but it did fluctuate slightly in different areas, was 3.7, extremely acidic. And, you know, funny enough, probably spent about 9-10 days, I can't remember. But after, you know, towards the end of the trip, I remember feeling my legs. You know, we'd been in the water hours and hours every day, and I remember feeling my legs and thinking, wow, they're so smooth. What's going And then I thought to myself, oh, okay, yeah, that would happen when you're immersing yourself in a basically an acid all day long. So my skin became extremely smooth as a result of spending a week or so in and out of the Atabapo River with the pH of 3.7. The conductivity of that water, mineral content, was negligible. It was very, very low. 13 microsiemens, which is phenomenally low. But you could see that before even going into the water in any way, just by the behavior of the insects. I remember we had come from Brazil, from a very silty, mineral rich region, and I took my shoes out of my bag with kind of bits of clay on them, and within seconds I had bees. I remember they were like bright red and black bees just flocking to the trainers and licking all of the mineral off of it. The creatures there are hungry for minerals. Another example were the butterflies. We saw large groups of butterflies that would just sit down in the water or near the water's edge, and they would drink away. And it was amazing. I'll put the species name, I know I've got it written down somewhere, but one of them in particular, or at least one or two, would be drinking from one end and immediately squirting the water out of the other end. Just, you know, filtering whatever they could in terms of trying to get some sort of mineral out, or whatever it may be. And it was just incredible. But yeah, the temperature was, the water temperature was about 28.6, which, bearing in mind there were shallows, it does get slightly cooler as you go deeper. So you have to remember that, guys. When you're doing a biotope aquarium and you're reading these temperatures, there is a degree of flexibility in those temperatures. Please don't feel that you have to keep your aquarium at 28.6. I in those shallows, I measured that maybe half a foot down, maybe it could be 20 centimeters or something at times. You measure these things. Other times when you find other species, I always tried my best. If I was snorkeling, I would always try to sample the temperature at that depth. So if I was 4 feet below the surface, I'm trying to sample the conditions down there. So yeah, 28.6 was an approximate temperature for that habitat. And that's more or less it. I mean, we moved on pretty quickly after that to the next location, and then eventually off across the Venezuelan border and into Venezuela and the Atabapo River and so on. It was absolutely magical, but that will be the subject of a video to come. I'll talk you guys through some of those experiences, locations, places, species. I'll try my best to share with you as many photos as I can as we go along, and as always, I'm going to try to keep these videos short and concise, but questions will arise, so feel free to throw questions at me in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. You can also find, if you go on Google and you just type Atabapo, you will probably find my article there. If not, just type my surname, Atabapo Englezou, and you will find my article where I went into detail on a lot of these biotopes. And if you've got a bit more time, you can read through them. But yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, be sure to tune in. Don't forget to subscribe and just click the little bell button, and every time I put a video up, you'll get a little notification to tell you that it's up. And I look forward to the next one. Thanks again.